All right, welcome. First, I want to thank the Black Archives for seeing my slideshow, seeing my presentation, and believing in it enough to invite me down here and give me this platform to speak about this. Yes, one of the greatest accomplishments in K-State history, story of how K-State integrated the Big 12 Conference. Before we get going, as we start here, the question, probably most people don't know me, are asking, who am I? Because it just says Kid Niederheiser. That was the announcement. And Toriano Porter in the Kansas City Star today, he gave me a nice article. He called me a historian. I'm not a professional historian. I'm just a guy with a job. I'm a data analyst, and I have a great family. My wife and I Michelle and I are about to have our 30th anniversary. We have two great kids. One went to K-State, Matthew. My daughter went to Iowa State. Both graduated with honors. We can be proud of that, which should tell you how well I married, because that came from their mom, not me. I have the transcripts to prove that. So I'm not anything special. I am just a lifelong K-State fan. Both sides of my family grew up on the farms. My dad was one of the big drivers. He was a big K-State fan, probably installed it the most. And then my grandfather on my mom's side. Here is his Kansas Sports Hall of Fame page, Ken Mahoney. He got in that Kansas Sports Hall of Fame for inventing this device called the tossback, which is a passing drill. He had actually invented that for his good friend Tex Winter. My grandfather made the 1948 team, Final Four team, as just a student tryout, made the team, became lifelong friends with Tex Winter. Tex Winter said, hey, I've got this new 7-foot player named Nick Pino. I can't do any of my wall drills in a Hearn Fieldhouse that we used to do in the old gym. He developed that, and then that later on became their second invention. Was what's ubiquitous in basketball is this breakaway rim. They had the only design that held up to the NBA standards. So about 15, 20 years, every rim in the NBA came out of the middle of Kansas and Dorrance, Kansas. Now, he did not invent that tossback thinking he was going to have a business. He actually was a dairy farmer and decided to join the Peace Corps late in life with his 5 kids and got sent to Sierra Leone, Africa. And if anybody's familiar with that, 400 years before, there's your heart of the slave trade right there. So I grew up knowing why Freetown is called Freetown. It's where the Europeans put the slaves back, and they named their town Freetown because they were free. So I do have, African art around Grandma and Grandpa's place was pretty commonplace for us. We knew it was special, but that's some of my background there. As we get into this story, I wanted to park here and make a major point in this. It's going to sound a little odd, but I did not come down here to the Black Archives to necessarily discuss Black history. That's not why I'm here. I did not come here to discuss Black history. I came here to discuss this, one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of K-State history. That's what I'm here to discuss. Yes, it involves integrating the conference, but I am not advocating honoring anyone because of their skin color. You'll find out that by the end of this, we are not honoring something worthy of honor, and that's where I'm at. Let's stop not honoring because of skin color. So since I'm the one prosecuting change, that's what this will be. This will be my prosecution. The audience is the jury. So right now, you need to start thinking not so much what this accomplishment is, but what goes into making an accomplishment good, getting it to great, getting it to be claimed one of the greatest in an institution's history. Obviously, there has to be some difficulty. There has to be some perseverance. There has to be a broad scope. It has to have broad impact. Those things get it up there. Now, what's going to get it into the absolute greatest? Well, you better be at the cutting edge of whatever you're doing. And probably some uniqueness would help too. That there was some unique factor about what you were doing to get from good to greatest to great. So for the rest of this is really prosecuting a case of change, and you're the jury. So by the end of this, you will get your say on whether, yes, this is one of the greatest accomplishments in school history. We're going to get to the sports part later, but I did want to meet these trailblazers before we get started. Harold Robinson, he's the one you're going to hear the most about. He's the one that's credited with breaking the color barrier. He was the first scholarship athlete in the Big Seven, and scholarships worked a little bit different. Each sport only got 1 or 2, and they were actually scholarships, academic scholarships given to sports players, not like today with the 85 and now 105-man rosters. He was an all-conference center. He was joined on that team by Hoyt Givens. Now he's listed as a walk-on, not a scholarship player. In today's terms, yes, he would be a scholarship football player. Johnny Caldwell, also from Kansas City, Kansas. I do want to park here and make one more point. I was actually able to interview, of all the Trailblazers, I was able to interview Mr. Caldwell. Had an hour-long conversation with him. I can tell you that after K-State, he left and went to Kalamazoo, Michigan, worked his way up to become a principal. The year that Kalamazoo integrated their schools, he spent the summer before his first job as a principal going into the homes of those most opposed to school integration to talk them down, convince them that this was a good idea. These were high-class people. The point I wanted to make in this conversation I had with him is I want to make a quick point about knowledge. Too often we associate knowledge with just intellectual knowledge, just factual knowledge. I think there's two parts. I think there are the facts, there's also the emotion. There's emotional knowledge too. That provides the context. I don't have any emotional knowledge of getting pulled over because I'm driving a nicer car than I should be. I've heard of that happening. I don't have that emotional knowledge, but I do have the factual knowledge. And I think it takes both, because if you just go off facts, you lose the context. You swing on emotion, you might get too emotional and mess up the facts. So what I'm going to do is just provide the facts. And if I get lucky enough to write a book about this, I'm going to have others come in and read it and supply that emotional knowledge. I got this out of his conversation with him because one thing I noticed was I've seen films about Birmingham and Selma and things that happened in the civil rights era. Him telling me on Points Avenue in Manhattan, Kansas, that he was denied service at a restaurant, that hit me emotionally more than those others. And I figured out, because this is a place I love, I can see the whole scene versus just, a grainy film of camera. Honestly, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe this place I love so much, these things happen, but they did. I have to accept that. So I did get a little of the emotional understanding, but that kind of led me to, we need both. So I'm not going to sit here and say I have all the emotional knowledge, but I think we can put the two together, and both of them make up intellectual knowledge. Easter Ray Elliott played baseball. He's from Richmond, Missouri. The K-State legend Veryl Switzer became the first to graduate on scholarship from Nicodemus, Kansas. Nicodemus, the Exoduster, Nicodemus, Kansas, the only settlement of African-American settlement west of the Mississippi still in existence. They have a great festival at the end of this month. He came back, spent 30 years at K-State, basically invented minority affairs at college campuses. James Gentry played football. He's from Kansas City, Kansas for a season. Earl Woods. Hopefully everybody knows Earl Woods, or at least knows his son. That is Tiger Woods' father. Earl Woods from Manhattan, Kansas. Played baseball. We'll get into him a little bit later. I've got twins from Kansas City, Don Harris and Ron Harris. And then Gene Wilson broke the color barrier in basketball and ran track and field. Took 10 athletes, 5 sports, 3 school years until another school in this conference had 1 black athlete. So it wasn't just, trivia question, Harold Robinson broke the color barrier. Who was first? I don't care about that. It took all 10. Took 10 athletes, 3 seasons. In the 3rd year was when Gene Wilson was joined by LaVanna Squires at KU as another team sport black player in this conference. And in football, it was 3 full seasons. They could have had him at any time, but it was 3 full seasons. So is this trailblazing uniquely historic? Let's get to that first. I said that's something to make something from great to greatest. Here's a quote from Gene Wilson. It was easy breaking the color barrier because the university president was pushing integration, and that made it easier for all of us. Now, has anyone heard the word easy used to describe integration? This was the money quote that told me when I was getting into this, we have something special here. We have something that gets into that greatest category. Were they on the cutting edge of history? A little blurry, but this slide is part of this timeline you see here. This runs from Juneteenth, 1865, all the way to today. And it's juxtaposing what was going on in Manhattan at the time versus what was going on in the nation. And we will talk about these things. Milton Eisenhower became the president in 43. We're talking about this time period in the purple bar there. And what you can't read, but the swimming pool is integrated, our murals are integrated. In this time period, we had our first interracial housing project in Manhattan. And you can see Brown versus Board isn't going to happen till out here. Back in here, the Supreme Court is saying white primaries are constitutional. They reversed that 9 years later and said, hey, maybe white only primaries shouldn't be constitutional. Things were simmering here where the Supreme Court is saying, yeah, you can throw Japanese Americans in concentration camps with no due process, completely constitutional. That would get reversed later. Here they're saying poll taxes at elections, completely constitutional. And it goes back even further than that. And here you have things starting to happen well. Shelley versus Kramer. I said back here, K-State had their first integrated housing project. This was the decision that said racial housing covenants are unconstitutional, which the Supreme Court back here in the 20s and teens said was constitutional. If you're not familiar with those, you can go into the deeds of most old neighborhoods in most cities, and the deed will read, you cannot sell this house to an African American for 50 years or ever, and it was deemed constitutional. And that's just living in the same neighborhood. Here, K-State, we had black students and white students living together. Those anti-miscegenation laws were on the books all the way up until 68, 64, 68. Did the Supreme Court say, laws that say black and white people can't live together are unconstitutional? Yes, we were on the cutting edge of history. Things were simmering, for sure. But yes, we acted before. Negro Leagues, or Jackie Robinson, Larry Doby, happened 2 years before the sports, but you can see we were already on that path. Is it cutting edge of history? Yeah. Is Manhattan historic? Well, if you go on the south side of Manhattan, you'll see this Douglas Activity Center. That was actually built by the USO because in a segregated army, the black troops lived on Yuma Street in Manhattan, Kansas. They built 2 community centers, one for blacks, one for whites, because Fort Riley was getting overrun, but the blacks couldn't live there. And then they turned it over to Manhattan. Well, you had Joe Louis, Jackie Robinson. They've been in that building training. Entertainers came in, USO entertainers, Lena Horne, Duke Ellington, Martin Luther King, when he spoke in Manhattan, he started from here and he walked to campus from there. Rosa Parks also been in that building. In fact, due to Yuma Street and the Landon Lecture Series at Kansas State, all those people have visited Manhattan, Kansas. First elected senator since Reconstruction, mayor of Los Angeles. I would say Manhattan's historic. I don't know too many towns that can produce a roster of visitors like that, let alone a 50,000 person town in the middle of Kansas. We are important, we are historic. Absolutely, I would say so. It's a pretty impressive list. So let's get into this, how this happened. We're going to deal with Milton S. Eisenhower. He was the youngest of the Eisenhower brothers. It's actually he's the one of them that was a K-State graduate in 1964. He actually planned on staying in Manhattan and getting just teaching there, getting his doctorate, and he did so well in his Foreign Service Board that he was offered this U.S. consulate spot in Edinburgh, Scotland at Ramsay Lodge. That's going to be important in our story. He actually went to the K-State president and said, man, I'm torn. I want to stay here, but I've got this 2-year offer. What do I do? And the K-State president said, well, you're fired. You're not going to be hired for 2 years. He wanted him to take that. He knew what he was. He was Department of Agriculture. He got put in charge of war relocation. Does anyone know what war relocation is? It's also called Japanese internment. He got hauled into FDR's office and said, I need you to be in charge of this. he couldn't get anything just done. He couldn't get them equivalent housing. He couldn't save their businesses. He couldn't keep them in school. And he quit after 90 days, and that led him to K-State. Became the K-State president, went on and took Penn State from Penn State College to Penn State University, and then saved Johns Hopkins twice. They had to Bill Snyder him. He had to come out of retirement. They kind of screwed up after he left. And he counseled every president from Coolidge to Nixon, had direct counsel with every president. At K-State, he's got a little hall that most people think is named after Dwight. We don't make a big deal of him. At Penn State in 1973, he left in 56. In 73, they named the Performing Arts Center after him. He's revered. His wife has the chapel named after him. At Johns Hopkins, his has a library named after him. He's more revered at other places than he is at ours. And that Ramsey's Lodge, this is from his biography. Anybody can come up and read it, Exhibit A there. And I have a lot of word walls just to show you the original documentation. But at Ramsey's Lodge, he realized how important it was to learn from other cultures, and that's his money quote. He came to make leaders, and he loved the students except they were almost all the same. And he felt that exposure to different ideas, outlooks, and cultures was the only way someone could become a world leader. If you're going to truly become a world leader, you had to have that. Parochialism breeds misunderstanding. So then when he came back to K-State, this was his mantra. And here's the original condition for African American students. It says there are about 150. And basically they could go to class and they could go back to Yuma Street, and that was it. They could not use the dorms. They could not use the dining halls. They could not use the swimming pool. It says at the bottom they were excused from the swimming requirement to graduate. Yep, you're excused. Don't come to the pool. That's also in here. Now, if anybody wants to doubt that, like I said, I'm prosecuting a case, so it came with evidence. My grandfather's freshman year was the year before Eisenhower showed up. This is the 1943 Royal Purple. You're welcome, anybody's welcome to come up here and try and find 150 black students in it. You're not, I can tell you that. You're going to find 2 seniors. You're not going to find any of the 150 that were there. They just were not welcome. We had them. We allowed them to be educated, but that was about it. And people were pushing. Activists were pushing. Student activists were on him. You have to do something about this. You have to do something about this. And he pushed back on them, and he said, if I put my foot down, that'll make it worse. So what he fought was he preferred evolution over revolution. He was plenty willing to put his presidential foot down and open up these facilities. And again, we're talking in the 1940s here. We're talking 43. Rosa Parks is another decade after this, 12 years after 1943. So he started with swimming pools. In 1945, the swimming pools were integrated. One of the small victory. Then intramurals were integrated. You can see Kappa Alpha Psi did pretty well. And some of your trailblazers are in here. Earl Woods is in here. The Harris twins. Hoyt Givens is back here. They're in that other picture too. In 1946, he got some GI Bill money and built Manhattan's first integrated housing project. And in 1947, the dorms and dining halls were integrated. Now, he abhorred discrimination. But like I said, he favored evolution over revolution as the first option. So what he did was he built up a really strong relationship with the student leaders. He took them out to a scout camp, took the deans out to the scout camp, and they all got to know each other real well over 2 weeks. It says in his book, when you're doing kitchen duty with the dean, everybody's kind of humanized. He built up those relationships, and what he did was he went to student government at every single point. He went to them one after another. Would you be in favor of using the pools? Well, yeah. Okay. You pass it. Students passed all of this. The student body at Kansas State passed all of this in the 1940s. It's really rather remarkable. Here's the only presidential edict he had to put down. It's kind of a long story, but basically he approached the dean of the vet med school and said, you only have 2 black students? And he said, hey, this is hard to get in. I just turned down somebody the governor wanted. He didn't want to do quotas, so what Milton Eisenhower said was, okay, what about your honorary society? As far as he knew, and I don't know if he's talking all honorary societies or just the vet med, but only Cornell had a policy of open honorary societies. So the only edict he put down at K-State, you must be open, your honorary societies have to be open to all, or you lose your charter. If we could I haven't verified this, but K-State could be very well the first public university who had such a policy. There's a very real possibility that is true. This is his understanding. I haven't had time to research that. So that's how the campus went. I did want to go to Eisenhower on patriotism because this is kind of a neat story. After when he gave his inaugural address, and his wife recorded it and sent it off to Dwight, who obviously was in the European theater. He was U.S. commander at that point. He's about 5 months from being appointed Allied Supreme Commander. And when you think of patriotism, we think today of just, obviously it's fatherland, but we just, hey, be devoted to your country. For no reason other than you're from there. This was Dwight Eisenhower, what he said back, because he said, tell Milton to teach good old-fashioned patriotism. I want him to teach that. Here's how he defined it. That sense of loyalty and obligation to the community that is necessary for the preservation of all the privileges and rights that the community guarantees. This is why you should be patriotic according to the Allied Supreme Commander. If we're going to have rights and privileges, we have to have loyalty, and we have an obligation and responsibility to that community if we're going to keep them. I love this definition of patriotism. So how did this happen? Oops, hit the wrong button there. Sorry about that. How did all this happen on campus? Clearly, there was no pressure from national advocacy groups in Manhattan, Kansas, telling them they needed to do this. There were no rulings from the courts. We've gone over that. You can come up and see this timeline, click the videos. No rulings from the court saying you needed to integrate these facilities, K-State. So how were they so far ahead of the nation? Because a K-Stater led K-Staters to do right by K-State. I think that's pretty great. That's what happened on the academic side. Now, Milton Eisenhower knew that sports was a front porch to your university, just like John Weefald knew that. He was a big proponent of sports. He wanted winning sports because that would propel you and that would get your name out there. And he thought that integrating the conference would galvanize everything he had done on campus. And all of this happened on campus, I should say too, without one single protest. There was nothing in the papers. It was just done. It just happened. There's your administration that made this bold move to integrate the Big Seven Conference. Milton Eisenhower's president, Veryl McCready, Ralph Graham, who's a former K-State great football player, came back as coach. And then there's some of the other coaches. We will talk about Ray Wathier in baseball at the end. Some of the other coaches involved. Sort of an overview of how this happened. In 1928, the MVIA split into the Missouri Valley and now the Big Six, which then became 7 and is now 12. The Missouri Valley had a gentleman's agreement that no African Americans are going to play against segregated schools, and when the Big 7 was formed, 6, 7, 8, 12, that became none at all. Now somebody, a sports fan, might be calling me on, hey, how did K-State integrate this conference in 1949 when they've shared a league with Iowa State all this time? And they have Jack Trice. And if you're unfamiliar with the Jack Trice story, Iowa State has Jack Trice Stadium, the only stadium named after, FBS stadium named after an African American. He played one game in 1923, was trampled, died of his injuries. And then at a funeral, was largely forgotten for 50 years. Somebody wrote a story. The students then at the new stadium, let's name this thing Jack Trice Stadium. The administration said absolutely not. They had to fight for 24 years to get that stadium named after him. And now, they have a scholarship fund, statues, all kinds of things. But that was in the MVIA before the Big 7 formed. He was in 1923, not 1928. So this is what happens. 19 And originally KU and K-State, because we have letters from Jack Trice, the Missouri conference rep, when he saw it, wrote a letter, actually the day Jack Trice died, saying, hey, you played a black player. It's in the papers. He can't play us. And the Iowa State rep, oh yeah, well, we weren't going to play him against you. Don't worry about it. But situation's resolved, the letter says. He passed away and probably had a premonition it was going to happen. And back then, KU and K-State were on the list of places he couldn't play. By the 40s, by 1946, pressure is building within these student bodies. And it wasn't just the K-State student body. I'll give KU some credit. The one reason it went from Big 6 to Big 7 was because they stopped Oklahoma State's entry. They're like, we're not going to have another segregated voice in this conference right now. So they all got together, and it was still the Big 6, and 47, 48 becomes the Big 7. And they came up with Oklahoma, Missouri by that point. They said, okay, we won't leave the conference, but we'll make a deal. You can have African-American athletes. We get home field sovereignty. We get to say these athletes cannot play at our facilities. That's what enraged Milton Eisenhower, and he was out to break that rule. But that was a codified conference rule. 1949, they play. They defy the rule. We might be one of, and possibly the first school to play African American athletes at and against segregated schools. That did not happen. Were we late to the game in having black athletes? Yes. There were black athletes at other schools. They were constantly told, you can't play today. We're playing a segregated school. We have to acknowledge their opinions on this matter. They don't want you playing, you're not playing. That was the standard operating procedure. Either don't play the black athletes or don't schedule those schools. K-State, as far as I know now, was the first. I'll have to research it. I'm pretty sure they were first where the president actually made a statement. So how did all this happen? Well, I got a word wall here. It's from, but the important thing is this Linwood Sexton part at Wichita State. What happened was Milton Eisenhower brought his coach in when he said, we're going to break this rule. Brought Coach Ralph Graham in and said, how do you feel at playing Negroes? And he said, I'm 100% for it. And the reason he was 100% for it was because 2 years earlier he was coaching at Wichita State and he lost a conference championship because he could not take Linwood Sexton, his star running back, to play at Tulsa, and lost that game. Just so happened in 1949, when all this is going down, K-State will return to Tulsa. Here's the program from that game, and Harold Robinson, Hoyt Givens are names in it. 2 years after missing a conference championship, Ralph Graham's going to go back and take 2 black players to play at Tulsa. You can come up and look at that if you want. So he sends him to Kansas City. I want you to go make an announcement down in Kansas City. Kansas City's extremely divided at that time. We plan on using colored personnel on our football team from now on. If other coaches raise objections, we've made our choice. And Eisenhower proclaimed, and that's the end of it. We're playing black athletes, that's the end of it. We're not talking about this anymore. And this is from that, from the article, my research article, that K-State upended Big 7 competitive culture that was predicated on the exclusion of African American athletes. Here's your local media reaction. It's from the Lawrence Journal-World. Boy, this is typical way of the school up the caw. The Aggies make their own rules and tell the rest of the conference to go hang. Now, this is in my research. I want to make a quick point. I am not intentionally picking on KU. And I want to make that point because anybody that sees this will know I am the type of fan that would intentionally pick on KU. And here was the reason. It was good for business. Keeping the southern schools in the fold was good for business at the turnstiles. Oklahoma was a national power. And the schools just saw it as a rule banning black participation was simply a price to be paid. We know it's wrong, but we can't lose these schools. We can't lose them. We're going to pay the price. It was a Memphis debacle. Harold Robinson played. He made the team. He's the player we need. They got their good player. He was an all-conference player. They held him out of the Memphis game at Memphis. And as you see down here, his coach didn't have a good reason. And then he said, hey, they were pressing him. Hey, we missed him a lot. He didn't have a good reason, was stumbling. And he tried to tell Robinson, hey, it's a good thing you didn't go down there. You would have been killed. And Robinson replied, no, one of them would have been killed. Now, later on, in interviews later, he said, hey, black people weren't even allowed in the stadium. Sadly, K-State did play that game. They did not play the game. I wish they would have. Next week, death threats are not going to deter Harold Robinson. Next week's KU, and they were in the paper because he was at all-conference center. We're going to kill Harold Robinson. That's what the players put in the paper. We're going to kill him. And Graham went to him and said, hey, he said, I'm playing. Hoyt Givens, I'm playing. We are playing this game. They just wanted to play. They didn't even know they were really doing this color barrier breaking. They just wanted to play. And they took the cheap shots. And they got, in football, you think it's rough now, it was rougher then. And people did die playing the game. But he went ahead and played it. He only was out of that Memphis game. He played the rest of that season. Did it have broad impact? I mentioned that as a great part of being a great accomplishment. Well, legendary coach, OU coach Bud Wilkinson, who actually in his time played with a black teammate at his school, but now he's in Oklahoma. Oklahoma came to Kansas State that first season, and they were scared they're going to not play the game, and he said, no, we're going to play this game, because the rule only applied to the home teams. They weren't the home team. Bud Wilkinson said, no, we are playing this game. And here's your money quote at the end. He went back and told his very racist, and you can see Oklahoma in a lot of court cases up here. If I can find black players the caliber of Harold Robinson, I will play them. He let them know times are a-changing. Did this have a broad impact? Yes. Even Gene Wilson said this conference would not have integrated for several years without Milton Eisenhower. Things they endured. This is from an article by D. Scott Fritchen, who works for K-State now, but he's working for Go PowerCat at the time he wrote this. This was when Harold Robinson went into the K-State Hall of Fame. They played in Norman, Oklahoma. He and Hoyt. This is an interview with Hoyt Givens. And the media is like trying to find him after the game. They're in the shower. It says pop, flash, pop, click, flash, pop, click. The media ripped the shower curtain open and started taking their naked pictures in the shower for daring to come down there and play a game. And he says, you can see, I can remember like it happened yesterday, Givens said. He never saw the photos, but he said that kind of thing stays in your mind. Actually, I have a game program from that game. This would be the first time African American athletes ever played at the University of Oklahoma. It was integrated from that point forward. How did they endure them? Here's a quote from Harold Robinson that he had racists on the team. There were racists on that K-State team. I had all those guys around me, and they wanted to be with me, and they lost all the racist stuff. I knew how to talk to them, and next thing you know, they were my friends. That's how I've carried myself through life to this day, the same way. I'm friendly with everyone. Every place I go, I have a natural smile on my face. I don't know how to frown. When I talked to Johnny Caldwell, he would talk about places, you can go around the back to be served, and they would in pure dignity say, we're not going to do that. He said we couldn't fight back, but we were not. They let him know we're not going to do that. Conducted themselves way above board. I've talked to Dick Towers, who passed away, former AD, former teammate and roommate of Veryl Switzer, and he talks about how just impressive the Kappa Alpha Psis were. Absolutely impressive. In fact, he's the one that said, you need to talk to Johnny Caldwell. So I talked to Johnny Caldwell. Hey, Dick Towers said this about you guys. He goes, we had no choice. We had to be the best students. We had to be the best dressed. We weren't going to give them anything to come back against us. Very impressive people. This is how they conducted themselves. And this says, what this basically says, it really took Veryl Switzer. Like I said, it took 3 years. K-State wasn't winning even with Harold Robinson. Veryl Switzer came along. He's an All-American running back, starts winning, and now the other schools start saying, hey, maybe, we need black athletes too. Was this nationally relevant? Well, Mr. Jackie Robinson, who had been to Manhattan before, he got wind of it where he was at, playing with Brooklyn Dodgers, and just up and wrote a letter to Kansas State Athletics to let him know. So it got, and if you read his obituary, he moved back to New Jersey, and I'm not going to pretend this was all roses, okay? Things were tough. One of the reasons the reason Harold Robinson did not graduate from K-State is he married a white professor's daughter, and that was a step too far, and they needed to get out of town. And there's actually a story that Johnny Caldwell tells about him and Veryl Switzer and Earl Woods being in a car, being pulled over by people looking for Harold Robinson. So it wasn't all, but it did. And if you go see his obituary, they make a big deal. The athlete that broke the Big Seven, and he was in New Jersey at the time. So yeah, this had broad impact. Let's go baseball coach Ray Wathier with Earl Woods. Earl Woods wasn't the first, but it doesn't matter. So somebody was on the team a year before he was. It took all of them. It took all of them to break this color barrier, and he was a star player. And they gave him a scholarship. K-State went to Mississippi. I mean, we are in Jim Crow's living room at this point. The opposing coach sees Earl Woods. Ray Wathier, go warm up, you're playing. Hey, he cannot play here. He's got to get back on the bus. Coach Wathier said, then my team's getting back on that bus. And they got back on that bus and they left Mississippi. I mean, he's in the deep South. Did not play that game. Where they played at Memphis and held him out, now Ray Wathier saying, we aren't playing then. You'll see stories of his players talking about how they were taking every rickety back road, going to all these weird restaurants, and they didn't understand at the time, but now they do. He was looking for places, Green Book places. If you're not familiar with the Green Book, that was a book to African Americans. If you're going to travel, here are the safe places for you. But he thought he found a restaurant where they could all eat. And the manager said, we'll serve everybody but him, looked right at Earl Woods. So he said, Earl, go get back on the bus. Then he looked down the menu, and he found the most expensive item was steak. He told the team, everybody is ordering the steak. We're going to take one bite of this steak, and we're walking out of this restaurant. We don't want him to be able to reserve it. We're going to say it's not up to standard, and we're walking out. And I've had this double corroborated. A player said they actually flipped their plates as they did it. Final thing Ray Wathier did, he was in Oklahoma, and he thinks he has a hotel where Earl can stay with them. Thinks it's hey, nope, he can't. He can't. Well, you're about to lose the entire team business. And so he told him there's a hotel 3 miles down the road for him. Well, you're about to lose the whole team's business. He didn't want to lose the whole team's business. So he's, well, I won't check him in, but there's no rule against not having visitors. So if one of his teammates wants to have a visitor, then we'll do it that way. Ray Wathier said, we'll go 3 miles down the road. Does Tiger Woods know about this? This was from a 2007 article when he was playing in, I think, the PGA Championship in Oklahoma. And he said, yeah, my dad certainly talked about his K-State days quite often. It was a great time for him. Also, he talked about that it was very difficult for him as well. So yeah, Tiger knows about this. Now, how silent has K-State been with this history? I know a great deal of K-State history. I only knew about Earl Woods. I didn't know it went that deep. I thought maybe everybody was integrating and we just happened to get baseball. I did not know about the rule. I did not know about what happened on campus. Didn't know any of it. This is a 2019 article listing the first black players in the history of major college football programs. This is 2019. And you get down to 1949 and you will not see Harold Robinson or Hoyt Givens. You go on down the list and you will see every first black player of every other Big Seven school, but not K-State's. There's a picture of Gene Wilson clearly wearing number 3 this is from the media guide of players who wore number 3. His stats are in there. He's not listed here. He's not listed as a letterman. Now, I don't know if it's an oversight. I haven't checked all of them to see the oversights. I know my grandfather, who averaged like, I think, 1.6 points a game, he was the guy in the end of the bench they cheered for at the blowouts to get him in there. We want Mahoney. He's listed as wearing 14. Gene Wilson's not listed as 3. Last year was the 75th anniversary, and I pushed him, let's do something. And there's the schedule from the K-State website, and you can see we got Athletics Hall of Fame Day, Hearn Fun Day, Junior Wildcat Hartley Day, Celebrate Ag Day, Senior Day, Fort Riley Day. I'm in favor of all those days. They're great days. Now, apparently they celebrated the 75th anniversary. Can anybody find it? It was this Arizona game. They didn't put it on their schedule. They announced it Wednesday before on social media. Didn't really do any press conferences about it. Their committee were telling people that television, Fox, was going to talk about it. Never did. In fact, there was a 75th anniversary committee, and then I was informed that got taken over by athletics, and they want to do small things. I mean, they came up with a whole thing. They did show some videos at the quarters, but they did not bring back the families. None of that. Just showed some videos, which was good, a step. We had a logo for it, but we didn't make a patch. We didn't make a uniform patch. We didn't make a helmet sticker. Now, maybe they don't do that. Oops, here's the Rate Bowl last year at the end of the season, and Dana Dimmel. I'm in favor of this too. Dana Dimmel, former K-State student, player, coach, assistant coach, passed away unexpectedly. They put a helmet sticker on for him. They didn't put anything for the 75th anniversary. And again, I am in total favor of Dana Dimmel being honored. He absolutely deserves it. But so do they. Okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe conferences don't do this. 18 years after the Big 7 was integrated, the SEC became integrated. 18 years later. They put it on their website. And they brought the families to the conference championship game. And the commissioner at Media Days started his press conference talking about how important this 50th anniversary was. And bear in mind, they were living a myth up until now that Bear Bryant said it was okay. When he said it was okay, he played USC, and they had some black players. That's a total myth. They ignored these Kentucky players. But he talked about it. That's more. But, hey, words are cheap. You know, maybe they were just doing it to check a box, say they did it. Certainly they wouldn't put anything permanent, would they? Yeah, Kentucky's put up statues for the 4 players who broke the color barrier out there, so all their fans coming in can see it and know the story, and the story can be told. But that's Kentucky. I mean, let's be honest. Kentucky, is that a real Southern state? They didn't even secede the Union back in the day. They stayed neutral in the Civil War. A real Southern state like Tennessee, who had they would honor their first black athlete, first black SEC player to be an All-American, first black quarterback in the SEC, and the first black quarterback to win a national title. Yeah, they put up statues too. So as much as their slogan bothers me, it must be right, because when it comes to history in the SEC, it just means more. Not much I can say besides that. This is one of the greatest accomplishments in K-State history, and this is my phrase, and there's your Douglas Center. True college sports integration started on Yuma Street. By true, I mean you're playing everywhere. You're playing everywhere in this conference. You're going to be full conference members. We are not sitting you out anywhere. That's true integration. Having them on a team and saying, you have to sit today, that's kind of faux integration. So yeah, I think this meets all the requirements to be called one of the greatest accomplishments in K-State history. It had obviously difficult perseverance, had broad impact, set the stage for the entire conference to have black athletes. And like I said at the beginning, one of the players said it was easy for us to integrate. That's very unique. So yes, I do believe that this is one of the greatest accomplishments in school history. and I will continue to push to get it honored in such a way. My goal is an honoring of not any one particular thing, but it is honored in a way that I call REM, remind, educate, motivate. This is such a great accomplishment. We need something that constantly reminds us of our past, the good, the bad. We got to own our past, educate ourselves in the present, and motivate ourselves to the future. And with that, the prosecution rests. Thank you. Turn this off here.